I'm Dan Morris, you're watching Bosun Dan Bushcraft, and today we're going to be looking at some simple snares and spring snares, the really simple, easy ones. And today you are joining me from the inside of a holly bush on account of the weather is really windy and really not very nice. So I'm hiding in this beautiful hollowed out holly bush, having myself a bit of a time, keeping out of the worst of the weather. So the first thing we're going to look at today is a simple rabbit snare. The simpler the better. Rabbits are a great quarry to go after with something such as a snare because rabbits are very predictable. They use little motorways. They actually make their own runs and tracks, particularly through long grass, so you can see exactly where they go. You can also track them down because they leave their scat all over the place in nice little neat piles that helps you identify where a rabbit may be. They make the little motorways through grass and hedgerows and everything because it makes them quicker. If they're being chased by a predator, they can run much faster on pre-trod ground than trying to cut through bushes and things like that, where a fox would most definitely have an advantage. And because of those motorways, you can see exactly where they run. Now today we're not actually in a rabbit run, even though we are in a place where there is rabbit everywhere, and you see them here all the time. It doesn't matter, we're only demonstrating. I'm not catching a rabbit. Quick note on snares and things like that. Now, this information I'm about to give you was up to date when I last checked it, which is over 12 months ago now. But snaring rabbits in the UK, as far as I know, is still perfectly legal to do. There are a few requirements. As with most things, you do need landowner permission, and the snares that are UK legal have little stopper devices on the snare so that it can't full close and strangle the animal to death. Other things are you have to check them at least every 24 hours. You can't have them within certain distances of public use footpaths because you don't want to be snaring people's dogs and things like that. However, my advice to you guys would be check the law yourselves. Make sure that what you're doing is okay. These things change quite a lot. Like I say, the last time I looked at it, snaring rabbits is perfectly legal. All honesty, I have shot loads of rabbits in my time, harvested them for meat. I've never actually caught one with a snare. I've never felt the need personally, but I look at it more as a survival sort of thing. Personally, I think unless you are in a survival situation, if you own a rifle, shoot it. It's quicker, it's cleaner, it's nicer for the rabbit. You're not leaving it tied up somewhere straight. But that's like these traps, for me, these are survival traps. So you can see how we've got this that is representing the rabbit run trail, and basically I've just got a loop in the string so that it'll close shut on the rabbit if it goes through that hole, and it's just tied to a big branch that's a bit more solid with my ever favourite clove hitch. And what you can see is I've used other sticks to make a little bit of a wall, a little bit of a barrier. Rabbits, like humans and all other creatures, like to choose the path of least resistance. So what I've done is made it so that going through the snare itself is the path of least resistance. Now the snare itself is held up just by little slits in the bark of the sticks that I'm actually using to hold it up with. What's quite crucial with rabbit is the height that you set them at. Now for most rabbits, because they hop, their heads tend to be a bit higher than you would expect if they were to go through a snare. So it needs to be around the height of all four of your fingers stood up like that, yeah? Now they always used to say when I first learned all this stuff, if it's a rabbit it's 4 fingers, if it's a fox it's 4 fingers and a thumb, because foxes tend to skulk and keep their heads down even though they are taller than a rabbit. Not that I'm snaring foxes, or have I ever. I've no interest in snaring foxes. Anyway, so you can see we've got that least resistance path, easier for them to get through where the snare is, and they don't know that it's a snare, and it just sits there waiting until the rabbit comes running through it. Now these are great because they're very passive traps. There's no baiting, there's no anything like that. You just leave them on an animal run, on an animal track, until something comes through. And the idea is no matter which way the rabbit goes through that, once its head goes in there, the rope comes off all of that, it dances around, but it is stuck. It cannot get off. Now with this one, and this is the reason why with a snare like this largely you would use wire or garden wire, is obviously if the rabbit can get its face around this is only cord, it would just chew and get out of there. So wire is better for that. Spring snares are better if you don't have wire because it holds the rope up and tight so they can't chew. But again, this one, it wouldn't lock on the rabbit, so as soon as it calmed down, it would be able to breathe. It's not going to die before you get to it. But that is your simplest rabbit snare. Your sort of ancient standard of old rabbit snare. And as with a lot of these simple ancient things, very effective. But I am now one-handed holding a camera and stuck in my own snare, so I'm going to have to put this down so I can get myself out of it. See, I know why rabbits can't get out of it. They don't have thumbs. So you might have noticed that it's a slightly different day today. The battery on the camera died. I foolishly didn't charge it, and today we are in the middle of a snowy blizzard. And anyway, is what it is. So this next trap is pretty much about as basic of the spring snare family as you can get. It's a really humble, simple little trap, and the way it works is it's efficient and it's simple. I'll show you a bit closer in a moment, but you just basically, to your spring stick, you've got a peg tied to it with a cutout notch, and then in the ground another peg hammered in nice and deep so it doesn't pop out, again with a cutout notch. Just pull down your spring, anchor it on your anchor peg down there like that. Take your snare, place it where your animal run is, like that, and it is just about that simple really. And again, the beauty with these is you're laying these on animal runs where you know that the animal's going to be trekking about. So you can see the pegs fastened together there, just hooked onto each other. This lens is a bit moist, so yeah, you can see you've got your hooks together to that snare there. And what happens is, as your rabbit comes through there, gets its head caught, gets caught in the snare, and as it struggles, pulls the peg off that whacks into the camera, and there you go. Rabbit can't escape, but it also can't get round to chew through that rope, because obviously rabbit teeth are incredibly sharp, and if it can reach that rope, it's just gonna chew through it. And this blizzardy condition is making things quite difficult, not for me as such, but for the camera more than anything, because it just keeps fogging up. But you can see, very simple, you just carve a notch, and then down there you've got another notch carved, and your spring literally just clips on like that. Rabbit comes along, pop, got yourself a bunny. It's that simple. I did say this is about the simplest of the spring snares. So aside from the trouble with keeping the lens clear and stopping it getting all droplety, it is rather beautiful. I do like snow. It's just for filming, it makes everything 10 times harder. So this next one is it's another type of spring snare, but this one is specifically to target birds. Now there's another very common, very popular bird trap around that uses a hole through a tree or a stick with a string and a rock and a peg and a loop, and when they sit on the peg falls out, the rock drops and pins them to the tree. That's not very friendly to the birds. I can imagine you end up with broken legs out of it, which even if you do want to eat them, it's not very nice leaving them there with broke legs till you get to them. But also, I've tried that one before. It's not very reliable, and particularly where your peg goes in the hole to stop the string. If it's a damp day or it rains on it, that'll expand and lock itself in there nice and tight, so anything lands on it and it just doesn't move. This one's quite a bit more sensitive. It will always go off if something lands on the trigger. Might not always catch the thing, but it will at least always go off. And what you're going to need is a couple of sticks. Firstly, one like that with that nice big hooky bit, because what you want to do is hook it. It's going to be hooking itself around the tree. Okay, that is then going to form the next part of the trigger system. with the spring and the snare down here. Okay, I'll show you all that in a minute. I'll just build it quick. So you can see quite clearly how this one works. Very simple. You've got that hooked stick that we had at the start that just goes around the tree, and then you've got this brace to your spring. There's your snare, and there's your bird perch. Now with this one, when you cut that one in, it doesn't matter, that can just be flat. This one down here though, attached to the trigger stick, the cut needs to go in at just a little bit of an angle, because if you don't, it just keeps falling off on its own. Also, try and keep this stick sort of as light as you can, but you can see that's holding perfectly. But this is an incredibly sensitive trigger. It's so much better than the peg system. So depending on what bird you're after, you could either put some sort of bait on there, whatever you can get, depends on the bird that you're targeting. Or if you're in an area where you know there's a lot of these birds, pigeons for example, and you know that it's a place where they come to roost, you could just set up several of these traps and hope for the best. One thing I would personally change about the way I've done it, obviously I'm not going super neat because I'm just demonstrating it, but where I've got my spring line here, ideally you'd want it to be more vertical so your bird has more room to land on it. This really, you'd be lucky to get a pigeon to land on that because I've narrowed that space, but it'll show you how it works. And there goes a pigeon. So basically whatever's on there, birdie comes in, lands on it, and as soon as it does, moves this stick, the trigger's then released, and the snare, if my hand wasn't so big, catches the bird basically, like that. Bird's got. So we'll just do that again. So I've just made a few little fine tunings there, tightened the spring up a little bit, made it so that snare runs a bit smoother, and let's see how it works this time. There we go, got myself. So you can see obviously once trapped the bird would fall and it would be just sort of stuck there. I know I've only caught a few of my fingers there, but it shows you the point that it does actually snare up and get you. And obviously a pair of bird's feet's a lot smaller. It does work really quite effectively, and like I say, unlike the peg in the tree through the hole, this will go off every time. So that's it, that's all there is to it with this trap. Like I say, it's a spring snare designed for birds. Nice simple design. It's really only 2 sticks. You don't have to drill a hole all the way through one. Hook just goes behind whichever tree. You could very quickly, in a very short space of time, set up several of these. And to be fair, if you were ever in need of them in a survival situation, that is the key. I've been fishing and we've used the little fish traps before, the automatic ones that set the hook for you and everything, and the chances of you catching something with just one are incredibly slim. You really do need to put several out, maximize your chance. And particularly with something like this that's as quick and easy to make a load of them. Easiest thing to do. And like I say, depending on what you're going for, a bit of bait, just some berries or something like that. Or another tactic, put it somewhere where you know birds are going to go, they're going to come flying in, near water, any body of water, or sources of food, berry bushes, things like that. Not much out at the moment because it's February, and it's just like that. And there you go, you've got El Birdie, and there's your little dinner. So for this next one, we're sticking with spring snares, but what I want to take a look at now is a different form of trigger mechanism. So imagine for a moment that you're somewhere in the world that has little wild piggies or something like that, and you want to catch one either by the leg or just generally in a lower down place, even if you want to use bait. This could be the very trigger system for you. So with this type, you can see what I've done is I've got it to the ground, and we've got the main anchor, the trigger peg there, going under the branch, and that's then stopped by that one there. Snare coming around here, and that is making a foot paddle, yeah? You can use as many sticks as you like, you don't have to just stick with 4. Remember, all of these are adaptable depending on exactly what size you want, you know, different prey, different this, that and the other. These are just to show you, and if you were using them in a survival situation, you'd take a bit more time. But the basic idea with this is you can make a much wider snare area and a much wider trigger. So literally something comes along, steps on there, and it's going to push that stick down, let the trigger piece out, and that should activate the snare. Like that. Yeah? Now, as I say, I've not set these up today to be particularly violent or powerful, because I just don't need them to be. I'm just demonstrating with them. But I also put a little stopper knot there because I'm getting a bit tired of it pinching me. So I have now just tightened that mechanism up because it was a bit sloppy. I know I'm only demonstrating, but that was still a bit sloppy. So I've tightened it up a bit now to show you a bit more in forceful action how that's going to work. Animal steps right there, and that's it. It's got you. Or at least is the plan. But you see exactly how that works. It's nice and simple. You would have your thing, you have your animal, whatever it was you were targeting. Nice and trapped, panicking, running around. And again, the size spring that you would use on any of these sorts of spring snares is going to vary massively depending on what you're going to catch. This, really more than anything, this little spring I've got right now, suitable for rabbits and other small little mammals, you know, things like that. Squirrels maybe. If you were genuinely targeting something like a wild pig, the cord wouldn't hold a wild pig anyway. You're obviously looking at larger equipment, so don't be thinking that I'm saying, yeah, look, I can get a pig with string. That's not what I mean. But one thing that particular trigger is really good for is drop traps as well. So if you're going to actually intend to kill your quarry by dropping something on it, this is one that does work really well for that. So we'll take a look at that. So a very simple drop trap or deadfall is this that I've just constructed using the same trigger that we saw a minute ago, and it is literally a rock over a tree. Now take the time to check first to see exactly where your rock lands when it falls, and I've also just shaved a little guide into this. This tree's dead, by the way, before anybody complains about bark being cut and stuff. It's long dead, this is. But I've made a nice little groove for the rope to go in to keep it smooth, and then just taking the time to take off any burrs or snags or any other problems. And the trigger is exactly the same as we've just used. You've just got the peg there with that foot plate that, again, it could be baited or anything like that to attract your prey. And all that's going to happen is, and I'm going to use a stick for this because I don't want to squish my hands. So here comes said animal, mooching about. Oh, hello, what's this? Looks like dinner. There you go. Squished animal. Now the dinner is your dinner. So that last trigger with the big sort of foot pedal on it is great. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with it. But in bushcraft, particularly with trapping, it's better to keep it simple. Now this trigger system is really simple, really easy, and it's a very hair trigger. It's very easy to set it off. It also uses a lot less material and takes less time, and it works really well. So this trigger, like I said, even more simple and easy. All I've done is tie a knot in the end of my cord, and then I've wrapped it round at least one whole turn, because what that does is puts the friction through the rope into the stick and makes it so there's very little pressure on that knot there. And then that knot is just held by the actual bait stick or trip stick, whichever you're going to do. If it's, you might be baiting it, you might not, and it literally just rests against that knot. And because of the friction in that system there, it won't slip out, it won't go anywhere. But that stick is very sensitive. A little, it's all it takes. Just a little knocking, the knot shifts, boom, down it goes. And it's absolutely silent in operation. The animal or whatever wouldn't know necessarily that they'd stepped on anything. There would be no noise. And obviously the more sticks and things you involve in the system, the more noise you're going to get out of it. And that way as well, all it is 3 sticks and some cord, and you could narrow it down to 2 sticks really. It's the little rappy rope method is a brilliant way of doing it, and you can set that up in so many different traps, which I'll show you at another time, because that is where I'm going to wrap this up for now, for this particular trap video, mainly because this week has been a really challenging week for filming. We've had blizzards and all sorts of stuff. I was hoping to get this one done in a day, and it's actually stretched out over a week now because the weather keeps turning on me. But yeah, that's the nature of bushcraft, and as much as I don't mind the weather, trying to film in a blizzard is, well, all you guys would hear would be the wind whipping past the camera's mic and all of that, so it wouldn't make much of a good video. And also, me being me, I'm running out of battery, so I need to buy more batteries. But those are a few simple traps, a few simple spring snare traps, and a couple of drop traps. And we'll do a lot more at some point. Other than that, guys, as always, get yourselves out there, get having fun, stay safe when you're playing with this sort of stuff. Obviously, these are only little rocks and things because we're just doing demonstrations, but if you start playing around with rocks and large logs and things, it's very easy, drop one on your hand and break a finger or something like that. But other than that, guys, get bushcrafting, and that's it from Bosun Dan today.